according to Buddhism, all beings are imbued with a spark of inner divine light. The Jewish mystics use similar words when they speak of that spark or the spark of God. The Quran, referring to man, talks about the little candle flame burning in a niche in the wall of God's temple. Almost inevitably, a spiritual search becomes a search for divine or sacred light. By cultivating our inner core, we search for this light in ourselves as well as in the divine. And that was written by Lama Surya Das. And I thought that was really beautiful because it's so inclusive. It's a reminder that we have more in common than not. Something that we talk about a lot here. When life does become challenging, it's a bit more difficult for us to see that light, to experience that light we're talking about. And instead, a lot of times what happens, we have a tendency to start questioning our beliefs, to question that intelligence that is greater than I. And that can happen when we allow fear to come in and to consume us. And it's prevalent right now if you watch TV, if you read the paper, if you get on the internet, if you talk to your neighbor, right? If you're breathing. And if you pay attention to that, what you know is this: everything's in dire straits. It's over. The world is ending. Goodbye, right? I mean, we're getting a lot of doom and gloom. It feeds the idea that we are going in circles instead of moving forward. And I know without question that we are moving forward. I know that. Chaos is part of the program. Without that chaos, we can't have change. And it's always, always a positive change. It may not be a change we necessarily welcome. However, it's a change that is necessary and good. It is so much easier to appreciate life when you feel like dancing, when you feel like singing and rejoicing, when life is filled with great experiences and a lot of comfort. It's easier when you see that clear direction in life. When you experience those aha moments, those moments when you can feel Spirit gently embracing you and confirming that I am. Or when you experience the oneness of everything, it feels like life cannot get any better. You wonder how you can, at that point, possibly ever question your beliefs or how you feel about life. But we do. When life is between those two extremes, we can usually hold on to that feeling of hanging in there and at least going through the motions, because we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, what about when we can't see or experience that light that is always there? How do we get through those times when we feel like we're existing and we feel like we're not really living at all? When we feel like there's no hope? Glad you asked. Because Emmett Fox has that answer, if you're familiar with his writings. He has a pamphlet entitled The Golden Key, and he has the answer to that quandary. He tells us to turn away from our problem and turn to God. Simply to stop thinking of the problem and think about God instead. Now, we all know we can't think about two things at once. It's not possible. So we think about the problem or we think about God. It's that simple. And we focus on God. We focus on life, on source, on how everything does always turn out for the highest and best of all concerned. When you can do that, when you can focus on God instead of that problem, you'll be amazed at how clear your mind becomes. things start to really work themselves out, because guess what? Life does not need your help. Right? And it always has a better outcome than we even thought possible. When we begin to trust in our source of life, God, universe, whatever you want to call that power beyond, we begin that path of enlightenment. In the Gnostic Gospels, specifically the Gospel of Thomas, it says this: there is a light within an enlightened person, and it shines on the whole world. And we all have that within us. We all have that light within us. We need to realize it, and then we can share it with the whole world, actually. And to be enlightened is simply to be informed spiritually. It's to walk upward from a personal consciousness to a collective consciousness, to a universal consciousness, to oneness with the divine. So we can do it in steps. It means to awaken from the illusion of what we call day-to-day reality. And that way we can see and understand what is real and what is an illusion. So, how do we become enlightened? I have a secret. You want to hear? Okay, it's not a secret. We have to want it more than anything else. And it's not just going to come to us because we say, please, 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 right? We're going to work for it. There's a Zen story I'm going to share with you. The Zen master and a student were sitting by the river. And the student asked the master what he needed to do in order to become enlightened. So the master turned to the student, and he grabbed him by the nape of the neck and he put him underwater. And the student began to thrash violently under the water, and he's gasping for air. And he couldn't get the master off him. After a few minutes, the student was still fighting furiously, and the master pulled him out of the water. And then once that student stopped coughing and gasping for air, the master said, "So what did you most desire when you were underwater?" And the student said, "To breathe." And he said, "Did you desire anything else at all, anytime your head was under that water?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Was your desire strong?" And the student said, "My life depended on it. That's the only thing I could think of." And he said, "When you desire enlightenment that much, you will find it." So it has to be something that we really want, that we're really willing to search, to look for, to live. We can read, we can go to classes, we can go to workshops, we can do all those wonderful things. Until and unless we incorporate it in our life, those teachings, really doesn't mean much. We need to experience it. Many of the great masters and holy texts tell us about spiritual knowledge, spiritual enlightenment, and how it's attainable. The Jewish prayer book says, "All who dwell on earth may find you." That means each and every single person. Krishna said, "True knowledge can only be attained by a human being." As far as I know, we're all that. Human beings. Muhammad said, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave." Don't stop, because you're not there yet. And the Bhagavad Gita said, "The sage who is intent on yoga comes to Brahman without long delay." The Buddha said, "Search with sincerity, and in the end, you will find the truth." And then in Proverbs from the Bible, it said, "If thou seekest hidden treasures, thou shalt find the knowledge of God." Again, they're all saying the same thing. We have that ability, we have the capability of being that. Now, enlightenment means more light into our life. And who couldn't use that? Not artificial light. Light that is eternal. And with that light, every activity, everything we do allows us to become much more clear. Not necessarily clear at the level of mind, clear at the level of our consciousness, the level of our soul. And that's what's important. When we do that, we're always headed in the right direction. Even if we think we've made a mistake, we'll realize it isn't really a mistake. It only appears that way to our human mind. It's the universe in action. It is in perfect and divine order. On our quest for enlightenment, we need only open up and allow that light to radiate, to share it with whomever wants to receive it. It's the same with the electricity in our daily use, right? Once we discovered electricity, we began using it for lights, for air conditioning, for our vacuum, for all these different things. Everything we want is immediately available with that electricity. We simply turn a switch. Now, electricity was not the invention of man. It was a discovery. And enlightenment is not an invention of Buddha or Jesus or Krishna or Muhammad or any of the great master teachers. It's a birthright. It's an inheritance that we each and all have within us simply because of who we are. A divine manifestation of the One. That's who we are. That's powerful. And I think sometimes we don't realize just how powerful that is. I mean, think about this just for a moment. What if all the people on this planet were enlightened? There would be nothing in the world for us to change, right? Our problems wouldn't be about politics, wouldn't be about the economy. We wouldn't have any problem with any country or any ism of any nation. We experience those issues because of the collective ignorance of our true nature. We as humanity, we simply don't know how great we truly are, how much power we possess, that we are love personified, let alone that concept of oneness. We have a lot to teach the world, don't we? When we realize those things, when we live those ideas, it's the epitome of enlightenment. And in this context, enlightenment has the capacity to be a cure for every little thing you can think of. Illness, hunger, economy, hate, destruction, wars, all of it. Enlightenment is what master teachers such as Jesus, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Krishna, they have been striving to get us to understand for how many thousands of years. That's what they all taught. Even though those teachers represent different religions, different traditions, their teachings have a great deal in common. They simply represent different paths to the same destination. They each claim their teachings came from a personal experience of ultimate reality. So why wouldn't their teachings be similar? What often strikes us when we hear or read their words is not that these teachers are telling us anything new. And I know a lot of you have had that experience. Because you feel like they're just reminding you of something that you already know, that resonates with you from a deep place within, and maybe you just kind of forgot. It's as if we've always known these truths at a deep level. And we respond with, oh yeah, I knew that. Oh yeah, that sounds right. These teachers' works each reveal the truth in a slightly different way. And that truth has been with us and within us all along. These teachings are significant guideposts, and I call them guideposts. Because in the end, we each have to follow our own path. We have to seek enlightenment in our own way. We can seek advice, we can explore, we can read, we can learn various methodologies. However, we're still ultimately on our own with how are we going to do that. We each get to choose. Life eternal is what we are. Wisdom is what we possess, and love is what our nature is. That'll always be the truth. And it can't be destroyed, not by man, not by thought, and it's not limited by time or space. Doesn't matter what the news says, doesn't matter what your neighbor says, you can't change that. To become enlightened means to be informed, to give the light of truth to our life. So being spiritually enlightened implies that our awareness of spiritual truth actually informs both our thinking and our outlook on life. Enlightenment happens when we actually embody and practice those spiritual truths. When we practice those spiritual truths. We can know them. The practice is what's important. Because it's certainly possible to be completely aware of something and still not allow that awareness to factor into our way of thinking or our way of being in the world. We can begin the practice by being just as confident that things are going to work out when they look uncertain as when everything looks what we would call perfect and fine. Just because things sometimes look peaceful and calm doesn't mean that's an indication of security. Our security comes from our source of life, God. And in truth, our security, our well-being is not at all dependent on what's going around us. Because that is not secure. Whether it's the economy or finances or children's or relationships, passing of a loved one, we can simply turn over and trust that God is in charge, that with God all things work together for good. And we need to hold on to that. We need to know that. We need to embody that and practice that truth. When things really look good in our life and everything's just going along swimmingly, we tend to start trusting in ourselves and not that higher source. Because everything's just fine. What do we need that for? We ought not be any less dependent on life, on the universe, on God, when things are going well as when they're not. We always want to be in touch and stay in balance with that higher power. We want to stay in the flow. We want to remain in that constant stream of connection. Good circumstances are only an illusion of security. And when things look good, it's easy to understand how things are going to work out. We can see almost in the future, right? Isn't it amazing how quickly we panic or question, though, when things are not the way they're supposed to be, not the way we want them? Looking objectively from the outside, we can see how insecure good circumstances are. Whenever you're tempted to worry or you begin to feel hopeless, or put a different, better thought in your head. Take a different direction. Think about God, Spirit, Universe. And do that constantly every time those thoughts return. It's an easy and effective way to stop worrying as you replace those thoughts with thoughts of God, just as Emmett Fox suggests. Deepak Chopra wrote, "Entering the kingdom of God doesn't mean waiting to die and then joining God. It is an internal event here and now, by which human nature turns into something higher." So we all have that opportunity to be enlightened now, here, on this beautiful planet. It is your choice whether you perceive things in life as good or not. Whether you perceive them as good, or maybe as bad, maybe as neutral. Consciously choose to see all experiences simply as that, experiences. Choose to see them as your soul's perspective, and know in the core of your being that everything always works out for the best and the good of all concerned. And so I invite you to always trust that process. Thank you so much for being here while I shared this truth as I understand it.